I am living with my family. It's me, a 15-year-old girl, my twin brothers who are 17, and my parents. My dad cusses a lot, and so do my older brothers. But apparently the standards are different for me. My dad overheard me saying a couple cuss words when I was on the phone with my friends, and he got mad at me for my language. And for how trashy and unladylike it was. This wasn't the first time he called me, and only me, out for bad language. But it was the one that frustrated me the most because I could tell there was a double standard. I thought of calling him out on his language and hypocrisy, but then I had a different idea. I said that, yeah, it was a bad habit I was forming and didn't want to make a pattern, because if I got in the habit of cussing a lot, that wouldn't make me come off well when I start getting jobs or going to college. And as I was growing up, I wanted to learn how to speak respectfully and intelligently. But it was hard to keep from bad habits when I heard him and my brothers having potty mouth syndrome so often. They're setting an example whether they realize it or not. So I wanted to work on things for myself, but also together as a family. I suggested we make a swear tax where if anyone swears in front of anyone else who's participating, they give $1 to each person who heard them. I'd want that rule for myself because it would keep me accountable, and I'd really like it if the family joined me for it. So my dad said he'd join, and so would my mom. They got my brothers to be a part of it too. They didn't really have a choice. My parents decided to make it a rule. I know it's kinda petty, but I wanted to make the point that my dad and brothers swear a lot and I almost never do. In the few months we've had the rule, I've gotten about $250 from hearing my dad and brothers cuss. And have not sworn once. It's kinda making my brothers angry because they often cuss when they're mad, and I ask them for money, so they get madder and cuss more. So I get more money until they shut up. My dad actually got mad at me too. He was having some drinks, calling his brother and talking. And I came over after and asked for $18. He actually said he wouldn't give me that much, and there should be a cutoff. He gave me $5, which sends a weird message. Like swearing is bad, unless you want to swear a lot, then it's cool. I did it because I know I swear the least out of my family, but I was the only one getting in trouble for it. Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it. Especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place. And in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he's started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister. But it was for non-profit work, making $22K /year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity /equity /inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. especially since I grew up blue collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen and we haven't really talked since yesterday. I live in an apartment on the ground floor of a house that was converted to apartments. My neighbors, one street over but the back of their house faces the back of the house I live in, can see my whole backyard and vice versa. My apartment has a whole wall of windows that are on the back of the house. It's gorgeous and is a big reason I picked the place. I love keeping plants and it let in a lot of light. Looking out, there is the neighbor's backyard which is large and comes up close to my place. The property line is maybe 10 or 15 feet from my windows. Once it has gotten to be warm out, I've noticed the husband of the family who owns that house looking into my apartment a lot. Even sometimes I'll look up and see him, look away then look back minutes later and he's still looking. So I started shutting the shades during the day, but that was kind of annoying. My place is a dark cramped shoebox without the windows open. And I can't do that for too long because the plants were struggling without light, so I bought these window coverings that make windows into one-way mirrors. During the day when it is light out, my windows look just like mirrors now. From the inside it looks pretty much the same, the windows look tinted slightly darker but that's it. From the outside you can't see in at all, it looks exactly like mirrors. The section of windows it's applied to is about 8 feet high and 20 feet wide. After a week of the window coverings being up, both of the parents from the neighbor's house came to my door and wanted to talk to me. The wife was complaining about the windows for a lot of reasons. 1. They were ugly too. It was uncomfortable, especially for the teens and their friends, to have a huge mirror adjacent to the swimming pool. It's at a time that they feel insecure about looks and they have lost interest in hanging out by the pool. 3. In the afternoon and evening, it was reflecting a lot of extra sunlight into their backyard. They couldn't enjoy eating dinner on the back porch with the sun in their eyes. I said sorry about the inconvenience, but I wanted it for privacy. They both pushed back on that some and I said that I needed privacy because of the husband starting. He started denying it in front of his wife, and so I took out my phone where I'd taken pictures and sent it to my group of friends. And showed her a couple pic tires of him gaping at my apartment and the texts from that time. He got mad and said he incidentally looked over, and the 8-foot by 20-foot mirror was a crazy overreaction. I said that I'd like to keep it, and that I was sorry, but frankly this was avoidable. I think they're both mad because they called my landlord, who brushed them off. I am a 39 years old male, and I lost my son in 2019 due to a chronic heart condition. He was 15 years old. It was devastating and I just couldn't take it, especially when my family did little to nothing to support me during these difficult times. They didn't bring my son meals when he was at the hospital. They didn't let me go home and rest even for a few hours. They didn't take care of other things while I had a lot to deal with. I wasn't offered any help, just words. They'd just talk but do nothing. Despite the struggle, I've created an account for my son's college fund and kept putting whatever I could get at the time, and my son would talk about that a lot. He was depressed but always believed that he was going to get better and continue his education and attend college. I started saving money to keep him motivated and to make him feel like he could be like any other kid with hopes for a good future. He had a very close friend that's about the same age as him. They were friends for 5 years, and I can't express how his presence in my son's life helped him through the worst days. Sometimes his friend would spend the night with us and try to get my son to do activities and lighten up his mood all the time. To be frank, his friend was closer to him than his own family. He never stopped visiting and asking how I'm doing after my son's death. He'd show me handmade projects he made for my son and as a way to remember him, and we'd sometimes just sit and talk together or cry together. Last week, while I was with my family, my sister asked me what I was going to do with my son's college money. I didn't want to mention this, but since she asked, I told her that I will be giving the money to my son's friend. She barely even recognized his friend and was confused and said that my nephew deserves this money since he's family. My mom agreed that I wasn't thinking straight and that I should help the people close to me, family, and that my nephew has a right to go to college, and I was wrong for giving this opportunity away to someone else. I didn't know what to say. They kept pointing out that I was making a mistake and how my nephew will resent me if he finds out. Thing is, my nephew wasn't close to my son. I don't even know why he'd be bothered. My sister went on about not being able to afford my nephew's college. I told her this was my decision, and I felt more comfortable that way. She started lashing out, constantly texting me, constantly wanting to talk to me, and ending up arguing. When I snapped, she had my mom calling me, basically guilt-tripping me and telling me I'm wrong and that I needed to think about this. It's just too much pressure and I'm feeling lost and unable to figure out how to deal with this.